3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
From Philadelphia to Los Angeles
And everywhere in between.
filmed at the Nittany No Huddle studio.
It's Jordo, Zach, and Coach Devin covering all things Penn State football all the time.
This is from 45 and it's blocked. Lions scoop it up. Brad Haley will score.
And here we go.
All right, we are back with another episode. Welcome back, Nittany No Huddle Nation. Today we are going to be covering Penn State, number 11 college football ranked Penn State at Maryland. This weekend, 3:30 kickoff, I believe, is what it's scheduled for. So we're just going to do a quick breakdown of Penn State versus Maryland, and then we're just going to cover real briefly the college football playoff. So we'll kick it off. Just got some series notes here. Nittany Lions meet Maryland for the 47th time in the series. I really didn't realize we played them that many times. I guess back when we were independent, we probably played them pretty frequently. So Penn State has a 42-3-1 record advantage in the series, including last season's 30-0 win in Happy Valley, where I don't know if you guys remember that game, but Singleton
I was there,
had
so I remember. In the rain.
Singleton had a pretty big game, 122 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a 27-yard and 45-yard run. And the kicker, Jake Pinniger, kicked a couple of field goals, including a 50-yarder. Maryland really didn't do much last year versus us, which we'll get into our predictions a little bit later. I think might be a little different this time, but that's what we got really for the series history. Devin, you got any fun facts that I know you like to carry around?
No, I didn't really look up any fun facts, mainly because I kind of was really high on Maryland, especially maybe a couple weeks ago, right before the Ohio State game. And obviously things have not gone well since. They started the year 5-0 and have now lost 3 in a row, including just a devastating loss last week at Northwestern, which I know this is a Maryland preview, but shout out to Northwestern. They are playing really, really hard football right now with all things considered. That coach has got to be moving up some boards that people are going to want to try to hire him soon. So kudos to them. But anyways, back on to Maryland. I think they have a lot of weapons, and I think that's part of why I was so high on them is they have a lot of guys that can do some really good things. I think their defense was, in my opinion, was going to be pretty good. And then really since that second half of the Ohio State game, the first weekend in October, things have just not gone well for them. And obviously this is like a quintessential trap game for Penn State, with Maryland going through what they're going through and not playing very well. And then looking forward to Michigan next week. This is this game is one that I'm definitely have circled and a little bit afraid of. So Zach, before we maybe hit some official like names and stuff, it looks like Jordan's frozen. So do you have anything you want to kind of say, overview of Maryland or anything before we hit some specifics?
Yeah, I think you actually hit the nail on the head exactly where I wanted to start, which was that Ohio State game where if you watch the first half of that game, Maryland was up 10-0. It probably should have been more. They threw a pick six right before the half that was just absolutely brutal. And talk about like backbreaking moment, not just in that game, apparently for the season, because they went from looking like they should go into halftime in Columbus in a game where like, are we going to win this game?
Right.
To they end up getting, dog walked in the second half. And then all of a sudden it's just fallen apart. And I don't think they've been like horrendous in the Illinois or Northwestern games, but they just defensively, they've not been great. Offensively, they've been okay. The running games, they've kind of gone away from the running game. I mean, Tagovailoa threw it 39 times in the Maryland game and 47 times, which is crazy, in the Northwestern game. And so I think they're, and it's not like they fell behind massively in either one of those games. So I think they're just kind of maybe getting a little off kilter just in terms of the balance that I think they need in their offense, because as good as Tua Jr. is at times when he is good, he has a tendency to make those backbreaking mistakes. And I think, you were at the game last year with Penn State and you saw it like immediately from the jump. Penn State's defensive front just manhandled Maryland, and he was like broken, not physically, but like mentally
Right,
broken.
100%.
And
Yeah.
he just jumped all over him, and you could just tell he was. I don't want to say like he quit, but he just mentally, you could just tell he was not right. And so something happened between the late first half of the Ohio State game, and then it seems to be carrying over because, I mean, again, we're talking about a Northwestern team that everybody left for dead basically at the beginning of the year, and gave Penn State a bit of a scare early, and an Illinois team that has been really, really struggling. And that's probably as much as you'd like to beat Northwestern if you're Maryland, that Illinois game, that's the one that's at home. After the Ohio State game, they really needed to have that. And that's the one where you saw that and you're just like, oh, something's not right there, because they had enough talent. And we make the jokes about, September Maryland and how they just fade away in October. But this one was just, I really thought, based on how they played in the first half of that Ohio State game, that we'd be talking about a 7-1 Penn State versus a 7-1 Maryland, honestly, at this point, which is crazy to think about how different this game might be looked at if Maryland had just simply taken care of business against lesser competition.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even dating back to, I mean, week 2 against Charlotte, they dug that big 14-0 hole against a really bad Charlotte team. And I think everyone was like, all right, Maryland is just doing Maryland things. And then they come back and play really, really well and score like 31 straight points, end up winning by a bunch. They destroy Virginia the next week, who now has a quality win over UNC. They go on the road and dominate Michigan State. And then I think that Indiana game really stood out to me too, is how bad they beat them down. That game was not as close as that score kind of indicates, even though it's a 25-point win or whatever. But like you said, really since Ohio State, things have just kind of unraveled. So, Jordan, I know you got disconnected there. We were just kind of talking an overview of Maryland. And I guess we're going to dive in more to maybe some more specific players. Zach mentioned the running game. I really like Roman Hemby. I don't really fully understand why they've gone away from him as much as they have. Like you said, I guess the Northwestern game, they were down by 13 points in the fourth quarter, but still to throw it 47 times in that game, that's a ton of passes. And like Zach said, I think they kind of got away from the running game, but I really like Roman Hemby. And I mean, I kind of like Antoine Littleton too. He's nothing amazing or special, but I think he can do some good things. So that's somebody that I'm going to be looking for is can Maryland run the ball? And more importantly, are they willing to even try? Or is this going to be the Tagovailoa show where our defensive front just harasses him, as Zach brought up last year's game? It just, from the first quarter, we just were all over Tagovailoa last year, and he looked very shaken at points. So I think that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for Maryland offense is, are they willing to run the ball? And if they aren't willing to run the ball, how much pressure can we put on Tua? Is that kind of how you're feeling too there, Zach or Jordan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to basically just be reiterating what you say the whole night, but I look at the last 2 games, and you've got Roman Hemby. We'll start with the Northwestern game. He only had 4 carries for 27 yards, which is a nice 6.8 yards per rush. And in the Illinois game, he had 12 carries for 70 yards. It's 5.8. So in 2 games that you've lost, partially because your defense has not played to the level that you would have hoped, your lead back, who ran the ball very well in both games in limited carries, is averaging, basically 16 carries, 100 yards. I think you got to give him the ball more. I think you just not just because I think your offense needs that balance, but also because if you're struggling defensively, the best thing you can do is try to manage the clock and keep your offense on the field. And they've just, for whatever reason, they've gotten away from it. Obviously, they like the passing game. They like the quarterback. We're going to talk about some of these receivers, and I do too. I think they got a couple of receivers that are really quality players, but it just seems like the balance isn't there. I mean, frankly, they've played 8 games. Roman Hemby has only 88 carries. He's not even averaging 10 carries a game. It just doesn't seem like enough for me.
Yeah, and I think part of it is they know, or they think, Baby Tua is their best player. So they're just trying to give him the ball as much as possible, like put the ball in their best player's hands, which maybe not indicative of the winning strategy as it looks like over the last few games. I mean, I think really it comes down to their defense has been giving up a lot of points early, and they're fighting from behind, so that maybe they can't implement the running strategy the way they want to. But I mean, I don't know. I think that's the problems I'm kind of seeing, but I agree with you. I don't think I think if they want to have a chance in this game, they're going to have to run the ball. Personally, I think
Yeah, I
airing it
think
out against our defense is not a good idea. But
Indiana had some success passing the ball though.
I think
they
Indiana
did.
is a good example though, where they didn't run the ball like extremely well against Penn State, but they didn't stop running the ball enough to
That's
kind of
true.
keep that balance. And I think they had more success on the ground than Manny Diaz and a lot of those players would be um, than more than they would have liked to have seen. I mean, I don't think they didn't really gash us per se, but they had enough success on the ground that I think it opens some things up for Sorsby. So I think if you're Maryland, that's kind of even if you are a pass first team, even if you do love your quarterback and you think you've got a great fleet of receivers, in today's day and age, when you're playing a defense like the one that we think Penn State has, where you got a lot of guys, even with Chop Robinson out, they can pin their ears back and rush the quarterback. It's really hard if you're not balanced. And I think that Indiana game, I don't have the box score in front of me, but I think they're a good example where you don't have to run it great, you just have to run it good enough. I think is kind of the explanation.
Yeah, enough to keep the defense, from only protecting the pass, I think is the key. But I really don't have much more on Maryland unless you guys wanted to dive in any deeper. I was gonna
The only other thing I was going to say is, I mean, I think that especially on this podcast, and I think people across the board have kind of thought that little Tua was going to take a bigger step forward this year, and I'm just kind of still waiting for that to happen. Obviously, you look at his numbers; they're really good. I mean, 64% completion, 2,200 yards, 19 TDs. But the number that stands out and what is going to hold him back is those 6 interceptions.
Mhm.
Obviously 6 and 8 games is not terrible, but to be elite, that number's got to be 1 or 2 at this point of the year. And to me, with such good weapons on the outside, Ja'Shawn Jones is a really, really good wide receiver. Caden Prather, Ty Felton, these are guys that can really catch the ball and really take the top off of defenses. I think that once again, we made the joke about September Maryland, but the difference is that Tua has just not been as good as I think we all thought he was going to be. So offensively, I really don't think that they have enough of firepower to stay with Penn State this weekend. I think it's kind of the situation of the last like 3 or 4 games for Penn State, other than Ohio State, is where this is going to be a dogfight for a while just because of where Penn State's at as a team. But in the end, Penn State will find a way. Just to hit some defensive guys Zach, before you have anything else that you want to add, I know we were trying to keep it about 15. A couple guys that I'm really looking forward to seeing. Where's his name here? Ja'Shawn Barham. He's a pretty good recruited player for them. He is in his second year, and he only had 35 tackles and 4 sacks last year as a wide receiver, but he's really turned it on this year, has 24 tackles, 3 sacks. He's somebody who they're really high on. He was a 4-star recruit. And then their leading tackler is Bo Braid. I believe he might be hurt. Is he the one that's out right now? I guess that sounds stupid me asking, but I'll look him up. I just saw he's
I
their
haven't
leading.
seen that, but
Okay. He's their leading tackler, so he's somebody to watch, number 2. But overall, you look at their numbers and they're giving up a lot, both running and passing. So Penn State should be able to have some success. They're giving up about 350 yards total offense per game. Obviously, that number has grown over the last couple of weeks. So I think this is a good game for Penn State. I think it's one that they can definitely fall into the trap, but I just don't think it's going to happen this time. I don't think we're going to be looking ahead to Michigan because I think we have to look at Maryland. So to me, this is a game that on paper is a trap game, but because I don't think we're capable of beating Michigan right now, like our focus has to be on Michigan or on Maryland, and we aren't looking ahead to Maryland or to Michigan the way that we were looking ahead to Ohio State. So I don't know. That's kind of how I'm feeling.
So were we looking ahead of Indiana to Maryland? Is that what we're chalking last week up to?
I just don't think we're that good. That's what I'm chalking up last week too.
Yeah, I think I think Maryland's going to stick around. Yeah, their defensive numbers haven't been good, but neither has our offense. So it's kind of something's got to give, or maybe they meet in the middle and both have okay days. But I mean, I think the turnover key that you brought up with Tua, that's going to be the issue. So if we can get the turnovers, I think we'll be all right. But
And just like Robert says there in our comment, I mean, if we can pressure him into bad throws like we did last year, it should play into our favor.
yeah, I have a bad feeling about this game for some reason. And maybe it's just the bad taste from last week, but we can kind of go into our predictions here. I think it's going to be a close game. I think we'll eke out a win because that just seems to be our MO. Like, we just keep winning and just lose to Michigan and Ohio State. But I think it'll be a lot closer, especially going into the fourth quarter. So I'm going to say Penn State 24, Maryland 20.
So last week, I feel like technically my prediction was the closest, although I did not give Indiana enough credit. So I'm going to go Penn State 31, Maryland 17.
I like it. So I'm going to go Penn State 27, Maryland 24. I'm with Jordan a little bit more on this. I think I think there's a lot to be said about the Indiana game being your classic post Ohio State hangover. We've seen it. We've talked about it ad nauseum with Franklin. That there's two ways to look at it, right? One is we kind of knew they were going to have this the Ohio State hangover, and they still did, even though at that point it should be, you should almost as a team be able to get over that hump, right? But the flip side is that game last Saturday is the type of game that they've lost before. That game was 2021 Illinois, right? That game was 2018 Michigan State. Not 2017 Michigan State, when Michigan State was actually pretty good, but 2018 Michigan State, not a very good team. Franklin's teams have lost that game before. And so if there's one positive takeaway, it's that they could have lost that Indiana game. I think there's a lot of revisionist history where it's like, oh, we were fine. We were never really going to lose that game. It was in the balance in the last 2 minutes. So if there's one takeaway, it's that his team has lost that type of game before in the past, and they found a way up off the mat. As ugly as that Allard interception was, you got to hope that long pass to Lambert Smith is the type of spark that, just to finally get the monkey off your back. And they've got that long
throw.
pass.
I mean, we didn't talk about that game. That was a
beautiful catch. I mean, and Lambert Smith did a really nice job in that play too. A lot of receivers just kind of chased the ball there, but I think he actually knew he had time, and so he sort of slowed down and kept the defender on his back, and then burst at the last second. And then obviously the tiptoeing the sideline was just really, really good. But all that to say, there's some I am taking away some positive from that game. It'd be really easy to say we're horrible, Indiana stinks, and we can't even beat them. That there's some of that, but also I think there's some positives to take away. The problem for me is I don't think defensively it was as much about a couple flukes as a lot of the pundits are saying. Yes, there was the 2 long touchdown passes, one of which was clearly just a blown coverage. The other one was a legit touchdown where they beat us in man coverage, but they moved the ball pretty well through the air, honestly. And I think they ran the ball just well enough that I really think if Maryland, with the better offensive players that I think Maryland has compared to Indiana, if they can get anything going in the run game, couple guys we didn't really talk about, I really like their receiving core. They've got basically 3 receivers and a tight end who are all kind of similar as far as targets and receptions and yards. Jayshon Jones has had a really good year. If he's a guy that you haven't seen, be prepared for him. Number 6, he's very good. He's got 36 catches for almost 500 yards and 3 touchdowns. Caden Prather is actually a transfer from West Virginia, who Penn State was really high on in the transfer portal. They didn't get him. Frankly, we probably wish we had at this point. He's got 30 catches for 426 yards.
He definitely doesn't wish we would have got him.
Well, and he's kind of a smaller sort of a slot receiver, quick type receiver. And then Ty Felton has 29 catches for 394. Yeah, it would fit right in with us. But and then Corey, I don't want to forget the tight end. Corey Dyches has had a really nice year at tight end, 29 catches, 301. So you've got 4 guys. He has a touchdown as well. You've got 3 receivers and a tight end, all of whom have around 30 receptions between 300 and 500 yards. And Roman Hemby's got some pretty nice stats out of the backfield as well. So I feel like the pieces are there. I would not be surprised if the defense. I would not be surprised if the defense really buttons everything up from last week and improves. But I also think that there was maybe more to it last week than just a couple of flukes. I think Indiana found some things, and I think they kind of laid the blueprint for a team with perhaps lesser talent, the way to do it. And so I think Maryland's going to score. I'm not sounding the alarms for our defense, but I don't think this is a game that we're going to, it's not going to be like an Iowa type game where we can just score a touchdown or two and then rely on the defense. The offense is going to have to keep pace a little bit. So anyway, I'm 27-24, I think is what I said.
I think possibly Manny Diaz got a job offer after Ohio State. So he looked very unsatisfied on the sideline last week.
Maybe.
He did not look happy after that broken play touchdown. That was
for anybody watching. Feel free to put your score prediction in there. We'll throw it on the screen. Shout out to Robert Kaufman for commenting. We'll move along. So I'll see if I can present the top 25 right here. Let me see. There we go. All right. So I got the college football rankings came out right off the bat. What is your guys' reaction to it? I know a lot of non-Buckeye fans are upset that they're ranked 1, but I kind of like it. And I know I put our the BCS, somebody remakes the BCS every week rankings, and they were pretty close to this. So I don't have any real issue with it. I think from a Penn State perspective, we are properly ranked. I don't think you can, with our record, I don't think you could put anybody 12 through 25 ahead of us. Does that mean they couldn't beat us? I'm not saying that either, but I'm pretty happy with the overall top 25. I didn't know if there were anything you guys wanted to talk about with the college football rankings coming out.
So a couple of things that stand out to me is I agree with you. I don't have Ohio State number 1 in my ranking, but I'm actually kind of okay with it. I think you reward them. They went and they played at Notre Dame and they found a way to win. It wasn't pretty, but I think you reward a team for doing that. And then obviously the Penn State win holds some weight. I'm a little bit surprised. I think the things that stand out to me, one, I think Louisville is really high, but I get especially because Duke is not ranked anymore. So to me, to have Louisville up at 13 is a little high, but I guess if you want them to be ahead of Notre Dame because they beat them head to head, then I guess it makes sense. But even though Louisville beat Notre Dame head to head, I don't think Louisville is still better than Notre Dame. They were better than them that night. Tennessee is so overrated. I don't understand how anyone thinks they're good. They're not. They are not that good. 17 is way too high for them. And I also feel like Oklahoma State's a little high. I don't see what everyone's seeing. I know Zach maybe has some comments about Oklahoma State. I feel like you think that they're okay. I haven't seen it yet, but I definitely could be wrong. And then I guess the last thing I'll say before throwing it to Zach is, man, they don't like Air Force, which Jordan brought up the point. Anybody in the top 25 or maybe Zach brought it up. I don't remember. One of you said
it was me.
Anyone that brings up or anyone that played Air Force's schedule in the top 25 would probably also have the same record, the 8-0 record. And I guess that's valid, but I don't know. I think Air Force does so many unique and cool things in the way that they find ways to win games. At the end of the day, they just need to keep winning and they'll be the highest group of 5 team and go to a New Year's 6 bowl game. So it doesn't really matter, but I am a little surprised that they're down at 25. I thought they might be more 20 to 21.
The college football committee probably isn't trying to have Cincinnati in there again. So
yeah, that's fair. To consider that the 2 group of 5 teams are 24th and 25th. I think that makes sense. Even though I don't think anyone is still I still think everyone from like 16 down, I mean really, everyone from 11 down is incredibly flawed and has so many issues that I guess it doesn't really matter the order right now. It's still only week 10. I mean, we're getting into the nitty-gritty part of the year now that most teams have played 8 games, but a lot of stuff can still happen over these last few weeks. So I think this is good for the first week of all the years that the college football playoff has put out their first ranking. I think this is maybe the one I have the least problems with that I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, at least 3 out of the 4 aren't SEC teams, so.
Yeah, and I actually completely agree with the top 10, just maybe shuffling a little bit of the order. I think I have Penn State at 10. I don't know, but I think the top 11 is the correct top 11. I would maybe put Ohio State at 3 behind Georgia and Michigan, but then the rest I think is exactly how I would do it. So I don't have any problems with it. Just I think Tennessee sucks, and it bothers me that they're so high.
I think the only issue I have is Florida State above Washington.
Washington has looked
really bad the last couple weeks. As coming from a podcast, I think that we unanimously had said at one point in the season that nobody has looked better than Washington.
Yeah,
they have looked absolutely horrendous the last couple weeks against objectively bad teams. Now, I'm not going to throw out like the 5 or 6 weeks of them looking really good and beating Oregon just because of 2 bad weeks, but it's enough to kind of just make you wonder. And I think as long as they come out, and beat USC and look good doing so, I think you forget about those bad games. But it's the type of thing where if that continues to linger, all of a sudden it's like, well, which team are you? Are you the team that Florida State's another one that's just like that? You could say, well, Florida State's the team that beat LSU. They're also the team that barely beat Boston College, probably should have lost to them. So it's kind of like, who are you? And some of these teams have that type of resume. And by the end of the year, usually you figure out who they are, right? They kind of show themselves. But I guess since I kind of jumped in, I'll start at the back end, and I totally agree with Devin. I think not a lot of love there for Air Force. And although it's early and there's a lot left to play for, I do think it's noticeable that they are already behind Tulane. And Tulane has a loss already to Ole Miss, which is frankly a pretty good loss. I don't know if Tulane plays SMU in the regular season, but that's looking like that'll be the big American championship game. So there's maybe a little bit of concern for me if I'm Air Force looking at this, wondering, even if we do run the table, is there a chance maybe we can't pass Tulane? We get stuck behind them. If Tulane runs the table, beats SMU. So that'll be something to watch for. As far as Oklahoma State, I'm not like super high on them. I'm surprised that the committee has them at 22, but I do think that they're 4-1 in the Big 12. They've played themselves into the Big 12 title race, and they beat K-State head to head. They have a very ugly home non-con loss to South Alabama. Just as far as rankings go, that has to drag you down a little bit. But I do think, just maybe not as far as like rankings or resumes, but in terms of on-field football quality, they're right there right now. They're playing really, really well. Interestingly, I think like the middle of the 16, 17, 18, I do agree Tennessee is definitely way too high. I do not see it. Tennessee got skunked by Florida, and the only difference between them and Florida is Tennessee didn't play anybody in the non-con, and Florida played Utah. So flip their non-cons, and is Florida 17? Is Tennessee out of it? Like, I don't see that at all. I just, frankly, it's the skeptic and cynic in me is just saying Tennessee is there to help Georgia, give them a top 17 win when they play in a couple weeks.
I don't know how USC is ranked 20th.
Yeah, I do like the order. I think so. The Pac-12 teams, there's 4 of them right there. Oregon State beat Utah head-to-head. Utah beat UCLA head-to-head. And I think all 3 of those teams are better than USC. So I think they got the order right. I just think USC should be a lot lower, if not completely out of it. They gave up 49 points to Cal last week. They've just been very, very mediocre. And I think it's all going to come crashing down for them when they lose to Washington this week, but maybe we'll get to that with our pick'ems. I think LSU at 14 is probably appropriately ranked, but I think they're the team. And interestingly, number 14, that's where Ohio State started, I believe. Maybe it was even 16 in 2014 in the first year when they won the national title. They are still in the hunt. I think basically everybody from 14 down, from 14 to 1, has a legitimate chance at the national title this year. Let me rephrase it. I think they have a legitimate path. I don't really think that Missouri or Louisville or even Penn State really have a chance at winning it. But I think everybody from 14-1 has a path. I think Notre Dame's stuck. They don't have a path.
Right.
Oregon State, Tennessee, they're all stuck. Louisville, Missouri, one loss. If they win the games in front of them, they will get to their conference title game. If they win that, they'll make the playoff. LSU is in this weird spot where if they beat Bama, they're in the driver's seat in the West. 2-loss team, lost to Ole Miss. Can they get in with 2 losses? I don't know. Who knows? They might need some chaos elsewhere. But if they end the season with an SEC title game against an undefeated Georgia and they win that, it'll get awfully hard to keep a 2-loss LSU SEC champ out.
Agreed, especially over a 1-loss or potentially a 2-loss Big 12 champion, the way that Texas and Oklahoma State and these got. I mean, I think a 2-loss LSU team probably has, with a win over Georgia in the championship, SEC championship, has a very good argument to be in over Texas or Oklahoma.
The crazier scenario, though, is let's say somebody runs the table or wins with 1 loss in the Big Ten. Well, the Big Ten's getting in. Somebody, Ohio State or Michigan's getting in. Let's say somebody, Washington or Oregon, probably gets to the Big 12 championship game, Pac-12 championship game, wins it. They have 1 loss or 0 loss. They're in. Let's say Texas or Oklahoma gets through it all with 1 loss. And I think Florida State's got a good chance of going undefeated. Right there's 4 teams.
Yeah.
Right. You've got undefeated Georgia playing in the SEC title against LSU. I think if Georgia wins that game, they're in somehow. Somebody else is not in. Georgia's in. But if you have the scenario that I just outlined with a 2-loss at LSU SEC champ beating a 1-loss Georgia who didn't win the SEC, that will be a nightmare scenario because
that's 6 teams.
All of a sudden, that's 6 teams in the hunt, and you can't just sort of plug in if you win the SEC, you got to be in, because do you put LSU in ahead of Georgia? That would get crazy. Or does the SEC miss out entirely?
If Georgia loses to Missouri this weekend and they don't even go to the SEC championship, but they have 1 loss.
That's what's crazy is there's very realistic scenarios where the SEC could miss out.
It reminds me of 2016 a lot. The scenario we had with Penn State, 2 losses, but Big Ten champion being on the outside to 1 loss. Ohio State, the team they beat,
that didn't make the championship. Yeah, and then when you look at some of the non-con too, Devin mentioned about the Big 12. So if you're going to be comparing LSU, let's say LSU beats Bama, or let's say LSU loses to Bama, and Bama wins. Bama beats Georgia. 1-loss Bama beats 1-loss Georgia, and a 1-loss Texas runs the table, beats OU. Who are you taking? 1-loss Texas, who already won in Tuscaloosa? Or are you taking SEC champ Alabama? Or are you taking Georgia, who just lost to Alabama?
Or are you taking 1-loss Oregon, who beats Washington?
There are some real crazy scenarios that are not just maybe it could happen, but I think very realistically
could happen.
Yeah, and so it's going to be really fun to watch down the stretch.
Carla says, well, they've ranked Texas ahead of OU, even though the Sooners beat Texas. Well, that's also because Texas didn't lose to Kansas. So,
but Texas has that trump card of
beating
they're
Bama.
The only team in the last 53 that have beaten Bama in Tuscaloosa. So I think I am a big fan of head-to-head, definitely needs to matter. But I think head-to-head should be the tiebreaker between 2 teams who have equal or very similar resumes. And I think once Oklahoma took that 2nd loss, they don't have equal resumes. I think Texas has a better resume than Oklahoma, even though Oklahoma beat them head-to-head.
Yeah, even they only have 1 loss, right? Oklahoma has 1 loss.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Just Kansas. Yeah, it's going to be madness. I'm excited for it. Even as a Penn State podcast, we're still in the hunt, even though I don't think we have a team that can perform in the playoffs.
I mean, if we win out, we're right there. I mean, we're in the conversation. If we win out, we're in the conversation, because then the Big 10 West tiebreakers get kind of chaotic. And I mean, you're right.
Who knows
Iowa
what
has
happens?
killed us on that, but
who knows what happens with all the Michigan stuff going on too? That would be something too. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. We're about at 35 minutes. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about before we sign off here?
I don't think so.
Yeah, it will be a wild week. Zach, do you just want to lay out the games? We don't have to go through our picks, but I know
Yeah,
there's
so
like a
I'll
great
run
slate of
through.
games for this weekend.
I think we got a really good slate, and I think some of the stuff we just talked about. I mentioned Washington and USC. There's going to be some shakeups, just because there's a lot of games that have important matchups. So we've got, let's see here, number 25. Well, let's use the college football rankings. Number 23, K State at 7, Texas, and Texas is missing its starting quarterback. And K State's playing lately about as good as anybody in the country. They just absolutely throttled TCU. Um, Another interesting one. Don't necessarily sleep on Texas A&M at number 11, Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss ultimately wins that game, but Texas A&M has been, for all the crap we want to give Jimbo, they've just been hanging around with everybody. They've played everybody pretty tough. They could have very well beat Alabama. They trying to think who else they played that was. Oh, they got killed by Miami. I'm thinking of another game. They've been.
LSU.
I don't know if they've played LSU. Who am I thinking of? I don't know. Anyway, they've been in the mix in a bunch of games, so we'll see how that one plays out. Jordan mentioned Mizzou and Georgia. I think the line's a little high. Georgia's favored by 16. They did seem to figure things out against Florida, but I don't know. This Mizzou team's been pretty tough. I think they can score. I think the problem in years past with anybody in the SEC East playing Georgia is like just they can't find a way to score. And so how are you gonna win? Number 10, Oklahoma at Oklahoma State. That's probably be the last Bedlam game we see for quite a while. Spoiler alert, I'm taking OK State. I just love Mike Gundy in that spot. I mean, the last time Oklahoma is basically leaving them at the altar, and the game is in Stillwater. And you've got an Oklahoma State team that's on fire right now. I love it. I know Devin's shaking his head, but I love it. And I think Vegas kind of sees a game there as well because Oklahoma's only favored by 6. Kansas, number 21 in the college football playoff, at Iowa State, which, by the way, Iowa State is 4-1 in the Big 12. So you've got Texas.
I feel
Oklahoma.
like everyone's 4-1 in the Big 12.
It's crazy. You've got, here we are talking about Texas and Oklahoma as if it's like a fait accompli that they're going to be the matchup at the end. Kansas State is 4-1 in the Big 12. Oklahoma State is 4-1 in the Big 12. Iowa State is 4-1 in the Big 12. Kansas is 3-2, but they have a head-to-head tiebreaker with Oklahoma. So the Big 12 could be really chaotic down the stretch.
That's who you were thinking of, Zach, with Texas A&M.
Oh, yeah. They very well could have won that game. So I just feel like as much as we rag on Texas A&M, and I love that, frankly, they've been pretty competent. I think they got a good defense and a decent running game. So it would not shock me if they beat Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss has been good but not great. So that'll be an interesting game to watch. Just rounding out the last couple games that we had identified. I mentioned it earlier. Number 5, Washington at number 20, USC. That's a make or break moment for USC. I mean, this is the type of thing where they lose that game, all of a sudden does Caleb Williams start sitting out? Where does Lincoln Riley, does the Heat get on him so much that he has to fire his defensive coordinator? Things are just don't seem good at USC right now. Probably the biggest game of the week, we've got LSU, number 14 LSU at number 8 Bama. That's a huge game. Whoever wins that is in the driver's seat in the SEC West, because Ole Miss is right there as well. They've got one loss in the SEC, but they have a game with Georgia coming up. So if you figure if Ole Miss is not able to beat Georgia, they're going to be behind the 8 ball, and whoever wins that Bama LSU game is clearly in the driver's seat. And then the last one, this is a really interesting one, and nobody's really talking about this team. Number 19 UCLA going to Arizona. I think Arizona has probably played in the last 3 weeks about as good as anybody in the country.
Yeah, I would agree. Joke. I almost ranked them.
I mean, if they didn't slip up they lost at Mississippi State in the non-con. Yeah. If they win that game, they're 3-2 in the Pac-12 right now. So theoretically, they're not out of the hunt in the Pac-12. They just beat Oregon State the week before. They who did they beat the week before? They killed Washington State, and I think they pushed Washington to the finish. I don't have it in front of me, but I know the last 3 weeks they've been really, really good, and they've been really good offensively. So I don't know. I do like UCLA. They got a good defense that travels, which definitely matters in the Pac-12. But that game's at Arizona, and Arizona's as hot as anybody. So
their last 4 games, Zach. Their last 4 games: beat Oregon State, destroyed Washington State, lost to USC in overtime. I think it was a couple overtimes, and lost to Washington by a late touchdown.
Yeah, so they've been really, really good lately. And there's always teams like that every year where they don't come out of the gate hot and you just kind of write them off. Or in this case with Arizona, you were never paying attention to them in the first half. Yeah. And all of a sudden they find things out, right? Like I think we all wish that was Penn State. Like there are teams, and I think Penn State's one of them this year, where just you kind of are who you are, and it's really hard to just reinvent yourself in the middle of the season. And I think that's what we're struggling with Penn State, and especially, you know, we've talked about the receiver position ad nauseum, and it's like there's not anybody else walking through the door. But in any event, those are the games. I think it's a really good slate of games. I think last week was kind of light in terms of games of national significance, but we've got a bunch of them this week.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. It should be very competitive. Let's see. We got another comment here. Arizona could take it this weekend. They've changed quarterbacks and now have Noah.
Yeah, I think it's Noah Fafita or Fatifa or something like that. He's been really, really good. And their coach is actually from the Harbaugh coaching tree, Jed Fish. He was a former offensive coordinator for Harbaugh.
I thought you were going to say, what's his name? DJ Durkin. I think he was the Maryland coach for a minute, right?
Yeah, I'm trying. He is somewhere, and I can't remember where he's at right now. He's the defensive coordinator somewhere, but no, yeah, we could probably do a whole podcast on the Michigan situation, and it's going to play itself out. Obviously, probably slower than anybody would like, but
Zach, he's at A&M. DJ Durkin.
Is he the defensive coordinator at A&M?
Yeah.
That is wild. So they
dragged on him. It all comes full circle.
You've got Jimbo Fisher as the head coach and all the baggage there. You've got Bobby Petrino as the offensive coordinator and all the baggage there, and then you've got DJ Durkin and all of that baggage. You know, potential manslaughter. That defensive coordinator. That's a wild coaching staff.
It's like something you see in NCAA. It's highly ranked. I don't know what you want me to do. But yeah, I'm excited. This week should be a good slate of games, and finally we don't have a noon kickoff, so that'll be enjoyable.
True story.
That's a great point.
So hopefully we can get on and do an instant reaction. I know we probably should have done one last week, but I don't think any of us were in the right state of mind to talk on live air. Game, so.
One of us had a pretty big life event on Saturday, so
yeah, it wasn't me. But yeah, I think that's all I got for tonight. If you guys could like and subscribe, it definitely helps the channel. We're getting close to those 500 subs, so that'd be awesome if we could hit that by the end of the season. I think that's all we got. We should be live after the Maryland game for a instant reaction, hopefully a good one. And then from there, we're moving on to Michigan, right?
Yep.
Following weekend. So that's all I got.
15 kickoff.
Yep, that's all I got. Nittany No Huddle Nation out.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast.
Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook.
Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.